All right, as you heard, Dr. Anthony Fauci is not so sure, but it does seem pretty clear that Admiral Brett Giroir, the former Health and Human Services Assistant Secretary with whom I was just chatting, does indeed think that the evidence points that to the COVID virus starting in that Wuhan lab. I thought that would be a good way to kick things off with Senator Chuck Grassley, kind enough to join us, the Senate Budget Committee, Senate Finance Committee, Iowa Republican Senator. What do you make of that? Are you of that mind, Senator, that this all started in a Wuhan lab?
For a whole year, we've had people talking about, and there's even some evidence that in May of last year there was some reports coming out that indicated that, and then there was it looks like all this effort to cover up that point of view, and everybody to protect their wipe out their tracks. So here's where I am today. Dr. Fauci, instead of just saying whether it's personal about him or whether it's science, he's the person that ought to be in the middle of helping us get to the bottom of this, because scientists like him don't ever take yes or no for an answer. Everything is subject to peer review, and all of this, whether it's science or whether it's politics or whether it's international relations, this is all subject to the laws of science. We ought to get to the bottom of this, anything. And you don't take the first answer you get, you go out there and get it. And we have a responsibility here in the Congress, because we appropriate this money. We need to know what it was used for, and we need to know every hand that an American had in whatever happened in that lab. This is all public information. The public's business ought to be public.
So, Senator, I'm curious, if the Chinese are dead set against helping us find out about this or learn about this or even grant us access to that lab, we're never going to know.
Well, you're probably right. But here's what the world community of nations ought to be thinking about, because the whole world is affected by this virus, what they're saying to the rest of the world is that if we have another pandemic, it's no big deal. They ought to be helping us get to the bottom of this for the sake of their own people. But if they don't want to, then the power of the world community of nations ought to come down on them.
You know, I did mention China, sir, and it might be a bit of an off-the-wall question. I'd be curious to get your views, though. China is certainly agitating with Taiwan, a bigger, greater military presence, flyovers, very intimidating actions. If they were to outright invade Taiwan, are we going to war? Do you think we should go to war with China?
Well, that's a hypothetical thing, but I think if China decided they wanted to do it, and as close as it is, that they could do it, and there wouldn't be much we could do to stand in the way, but they would be violating every law of every international law in the process of doing it. I don't get this about China being the second largest economy in the world, being one of the four biggest military powers in the world. Why are they concerned about this little island of Taiwan with about 32 million people on it? What is that threat to China? I don't get it. I like to think of China, every time we ask a question about them, they say, well, you're interfering in our internal affairs. They're a 5,000 old group of people. They've been around historically. We've been around in the United States about 400 years. So it just seems to me they ought to be a big player in the international community instead of being worried about what other people think about them. We criticize them, let them criticize us. But we ought to be talking to each other all the time. And there's no reason why they have to be defensive on everything that we ask questions about, including this Wuhan thing.
But if you were indeed president, or even advising this one, and China were to invade Taiwan, that sounds to me like an act of war to you, at least to you.
Yeah, it is an act of war. And what I can't tell you from a legal standpoint, the obligations we have under the 1979 Taiwanese Act. We may have some obligations there that we would have to fulfill, and it's very necessary if the United States makes a commitment to another nation, we keep that commitment. Otherwise, we're just like the Obamas, drawing a red line in the sand, and then that's crossed, and they don't have any retribution. Then it just encourages more red lines being crossed. So we got to keep our credibility with other nations that we have obligations to.
All right. Senator Grassley, thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it.